Guys, you'll have noticed that I'm less trying to kind of systematically explore or tackle my metaphysical system now, as I am just trying to, kind of get my needs met by sharing um, topics that are important that I think I would value sharing. So, this is continuing in that, and it's a pretty big topic that uh, people will recognize by its name. It's the topic of my Decoder Eyes. I've posted on Facebook and Twitter a lot about that. So what it basically is a phenomenon that I experience that's been with me maybe a little more than a year, or about a year, um, wherein I see little pinpricks of light of different colors, like um, just like um, in my normal physical field of vision, and they're um, pretty small. They vary quite a bit in a number of ways, in size and color, um, in kind of the precision of them, or the sort of like the power of the signal or the urgency. Um, and basically, un unknowingly I created this system, and it allows me to see this feedback that is a really important, useful way for God to communicate to me. It's basically like, I'll have a certain thought, and there'll be a certain light, and I know something about that. The truth or false, or do this, don't do this, things like that. And so it's a big guide, but they're also there's been times when they've led me astray, and I'll talk some about that too. Um, but yeah, so I guess you could call it also a psychotic feature that I have, that hasn't gone gone away at any point since I've gotten it. Although it can be it can vary a lot in how often I get these signals. So let me quickly say Decoder Eyes. So that name is attributable to my good friend Bright on Twitter. Um, and he had this concept ready made before I described it to him. He had um, some what's the word? Some intuition about this idea, and so it's decoder eyes in the sense of decoder glasses. Like, you get a cereal box with a like secret something on on the back of the box, and you put on your decoder eyes, and then you can see what it is, or decoder glasses. So it's like that, but it's where my eyes themselves are having the effect. It's not glasses, and it also the way it works is there's two like primaries, like primary colors, and two sort of modulator thingies, that one of which goes with each of them. And so the colors are upspin and downspin. So it's amounts to blue and red, though. So yeah, I guess that segues nicely into the actual colors. So the basic signal that I get the most often, and that started out the phenomenon when it happened first, is the blue. So at first it was a really kind of intense, kind of almost like mildly glowing kind of blue. I described it as looking radioactive, um, and really beautiful, kind of royal blue. And I would get that when I was meditating, and kind of um, see that color and see shapes of it. And and that classic radioactive blue that I usually call it is it's still kind of the um, kind of the anchor of the blue. So there's a lot of variation in blue, a lot of different shades, um, but the basic meaning that it all has is just yes. Um, so blue is yes, or maybe a positive feedback, like I just had. Um, like it could just be sort of for the joy of it. Like it's not necessarily all of these things are always like messages to me. At least not messages that I can figure out. I treat them as messages a lot because that's in my nature to try and figure out this whole thing. But they're they're kind of like also can be thought of as just like feedback. Um, so it could be a yes or some sort of positive feedback or just kind of a free here's some blue, here's some joy for you. Um, now the next is red. Um, red is more complicated than blue. It's equally variable as far as the shade and things like that. But it I generally can't. I generally don't have like the kind of internal resources necessary to do anything but treat it as a no, as a um, just yeah. If blue is red, then yes is sorry. If blue is yes, then red is no. So um, I've recently discovered though that and this was under while I was high. I discovered that really at a more kind of basic level, red refers to an object of fear. So there's a red means there's something in this course of action, in this thought that um, will scare you, and I typically just avoid it, and that's the right response is to avoid it. But in certain kind of complex codependency cases, especially with certain people, there can be kind of false reds, and there are certain circumstances under which a red does mean yes, where there's like a temporary sort of like a reversal or a partial reversal, because blue doesn't really mean no, the way that red can still sometimes mean yes. Um, but so where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so just when I do have the mental resources, and especially in those tricky cases where I'm not sure that of the right meaning for the red signal, I have learned recently that I can analyze the fear that is underlying it. So first of all, figure out what is it that's fearful to me about this course of action, about this thing, and then ask, why am I afraid of this, and is this a fear that I should avoid? Should I avoid this object of fear, or is this a type of fear that I ought to face, and make that choice? It's it seems like it's hard to make that choice without. It's hard to make that choice every time. Is what I'm saying. So I usually just continue to treat it as no, but there are times when it really makes a difference and can clarify the situation to figure out that fear. Um, so, and with the red, since there's some variance in what it means, there's often like no yes combos. So like I get a red signal and I'm thinking, um, is that a firm no, or is that just, some negative feedback? And then there'll be red followed by blue, or sometimes with yellow, but usually with blue. Just kind of like, yes, that's a no. Don't do that. You don't need to think about that further. Just, they can really I've been amazed at how much I can allow the system to represent, about how much meaning is in there, just from a couple kind of. I mean, it's all developed very smoothly, just kind of holding hypotheses and letting the signals talk to me with the way that they're with the best that I can at the time, and and based on the timing and the colors, uh, it's just it's grown into this whole system that I'm excited to be presenting to you all. So also, so red can mean error, error being the spiritual concept of um, that's basically more general and broad than sin. So um, error can be something that is spiritually detrimental, whether or not you knew it was going to be spiritually detrimental. It doesn't have to be, um, something done on purpose or with any sort of intention. It can be totally uh, just something that happens without any reason that you understand. So, like any sort of negative emotion would be usually a pretty good example of, you don't necessarily know why you feel what you feel. Um, this is from A Course in Miracles, and kind of from people that are in those sort of communities, the idea of error. So, red can mean error. So, error, I mean, it can be guilt, it can be fear. Um, I already mentioned fear, but any kind of error, really. And this is especially true when it's not just a pinprick, like the things that I call decoder eye signals. They're always just um, little circular pinpricks, but there's other related things with the same colors that I can see, that I've started to call glimmers lately, and it's kind of like using the same colors. There being sort of like um, a pocket of of um, of color that sort of I'm let's see, like a depression that's filled with a little bit of liquid, like kind of a um, like an odd triangular squarish kind of, just a little collection of this energy, of this color. um, I sometimes call them splashes because they kind of have that sense of being like liquid, like filling container. um, and Glimmer because I mean, they can kind of have that um, smooth, extended, pleasing kind of look. Um, so red glimmer especially is what you get is can represent air. Um, let's see. Um, and the other time it represents air is when it's being used with, well, I guess a couple things. One being when I'm high, but also when I'm having like a in mania, which in this case really means like micromania. I've been learning, especially through these decoder eye signals, that um, I can uh, I can go into uh, like a nominally manic state, that doesn't have any sort of psychiatric symptoms of mania, but it's just a different kind of configuration, or like architecture of my mind at that point. And I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Um, okay. So next is yellow. I really like this one because it has three strong affirmative meanings, but they're quite different, and I um, I kind of just rely on my state of mind, my intuition to know which is which. Um, and the truth, though, is that a yellow's a yellow, a red's a red. Like all of these things, I'm ascribing a lot of meaning to them. Um, but that's kind of more, that says more about the shape of my mind and of my kind of my internal structure than it does about these lights. Like these lights are um, just like most of the stuff that I look into metaphysically. I mean, it's just things are happening. There's metaphysical laws that are um, playing themselves out, and not everything has to have like a higher meaning or an intended, whatever. Um, so anyway, there's three meanings for yellow. The first one is do this, like all capital exclamation point, do this. Um, do this especially, although um, it will take a lot of work and or a lot of time. Do this. Um, that's had some big impacts on my some of my choices. Choosing to go to St. Louis, for instance, um, that was something that I had a, a signal for, a yellow signal. Um, Also, knowing, being sure that I needed to leave my former psychiatrist. So the second one is just yes. So this is especially when I'm already doing well, when I'm in sort of an elevated state. Yellow can just mean like yes, positive, affirmative, and stronger than blue, because blue is very kind of commonplace. Um, but a yes yellow is kind of like a celebration, um, or like um, the fact that I'm seeing it means that I'm doing well, that I'm seeing a yellow that has that meaning, and that's kind of just freely available and copious like that. And the last one is caution. So it also kind of has an affirmative tone to it, um, but it means the other in the other direction. So this is basically yellow as being something that's approaching orange, approaching red. So um, that's where that comes from. Um, okay, so next, gonna get back to that idea of mania, which, as I said, isn't the definition I've used before. It's I think often or usually nowadays, what I think of as mania is actually subsyndromal mania, which is a concept I only recently got introduced to. But the way that I'm put together so much more sensitively over the past, you know, year, half year, I I've been in states that I wouldn't have been capable of before, and I've um, there's a lot of finely tuned um, states that I go through, and these nominal mania, this micromania is one such thing. So although it's really just that I can see that that's what it is now. It's not that I wasn't in those sort of things before. So anyway, so there's two primary colors of um, mania, um, and so I have to be careful with them, because with that mania, definitionally, what comes with that is the likelihood of tricking myself. So, um, these are um, need to be treated with more caution than um, than blue, for instance. So there's sky blue. This is just a lighter blue, um, and it can be very common sometimes. It can be the predominant blue I see for a while sometimes. Um, but So it's what mania is, in any sense, I think, that I accept at this point, is that uh, mania is what you see when you, by sheer force of will, ignore all of the error, all of the bad stuff that is going on. So it's basically getting to a point where you can pay so little regard and attention to whatever's off, whatever's wrong, whatever fallenness exists, that you can forget all about it, that you can act as though it doesn't exist. Um, but then, it'll come back to bite you in the ass. So it's not, the truth is that we are in a fallen world, where there is error, and it's very tempting and very fun to deny that, but it's, you can get yourself in trouble. So um, and it's not true. It really is what it comes down to. It's not true that um, error that you go so far away from that it looks so tiny that you think it can't hurt you. It doesn't. It still can. So um, so there's a sky blue color and there's a lime green color, and so And so these occur without accompanying red signals, um, which is how I know that it's mania, which is where the error in question is um, sublimated, hidden. It's not visible, it's not out there. So you get these signals that seem very positive, um, but one must be careful. So I don't want to overstate it though. So the uh, the lime green one I'm especially fond of. It's the closest to my true natural will, and I when I first discovered it, I had to associate it with tricking myself. I that was my first definition for lime green, tricking myself. Um, which was sad because it's kind of my favorite color, of all these colors. Um, but then I had an experience that showed me that when it gets that this same signal of tricking myself can be used for good or ill, and when it's being used for ill, uh, it is tricking myself and it has negative consequences inherently for me. But this same okay, um, I identified that also when this lime green is used in conjunction with red, which means like closely alternating red and lime green, it's actually my true will, or the voice of the Holy Spirit, for another way to put it. And so that means that um, when it's in that context of the error not being hidden, but being aware, being there, being visible, this is your true will, and this red is the fear that you have of of um, of carrying out your true will. Um, and so And so I can extend that same logic to a degree with sky blue. Oh, and I was told through this through the system that uh, I am actually to take the Holy Spirit reading of it as the default one, which um, surprises me and pleases me that I can trust it more than I can distrust it, and I can accept it. Um, so, um, and I also have kind of an analogous concept with the red, with the sky blue, although I don't really come across that. That's not so much a thing. But I have a theory about that I'll probably get to. Okay. Next color is white. This is a pretty new one. This means do this even though it involves some error. It's worth it, basically. Um, and it feels similar to a yellow. And I sometimes think that white is just blue accelerated like infinitely where it loses all its blueness. Because there's some of them are very pale blues. Are it's like the Doppler effect. It's like they're moving ahead of me too quickly for me to catch them, and that's why their blues are so pale. Um, and the white is like that, but it's the absolute level. So um, next, there's purple. This one I try to avoid as much as I can. It's uh, both good and evil together, so red and blue together. It's like a royal purple. And I associate this with Christ. Christ, as I understand it, has a charge or a property of attracting both good and evil in equal measure. So they go together to form this union that's purple, but there's always that red in it, and so whenever there's any possibility of a blue, of a non of avoiding the inherent red there, I take that, and I think I've speculated that there might be other advantages to following purple, um, helping me work out certain kind of psychological conflicts that I have. But I've really decided, kind of after a lot of, I decided that I should just be avoiding those. Although I feel a little bit guilty to be kind of trying to uh, avoid what I think of as the color of the Christ. I've I only want to follow it when it's the only option that I have between it and red. So, and there is that case, and I had one just last week. So, it's not that I should never do it, but if I do it, I should expect that there's going to be some suffering involved. In that case, the red just really kind of means suffering. It doesn't necessarily mean evil. Um, so, um, I have a kind of as an afterthought to purple. There's a very new one that's just about 2 days old that I'm uh, finding, which is kind of like a lighter, a violet kind of liquid looking color. Um, and I speculate that that is the result of sky blue and red. So uh, it's like purple, but it's actually more positive because it is the combination of the error that's manifest instead of hidden in the manic state. That plus the sky blue that I want to follow anyway. I mean, uh, I I revel in those blues, even the ones that are trickier or less clear. So I'm gonna try to. I feel like I've been talking way too long already. I'm gonna try to zip through the rest. Um, okay, so there's orange. It's rare. It's unusual insofar as uh, it's usually not a pinprick of light, but kind of like a smear of light. Um, and I think that means it's a fear that I've got to face, a fear that I ought to face. Um, and then, uh, okay, I already said that. Um, so um, I have another fun experience of fairy dust, which is pretty much just what it sounds like. It's kind of the the rare moments when I've been in a true manic state rather than this subsyndronal or whatever. I get just kind of these beautiful musical flourishes of little, really tiny, really tiny lights, and I think it literally is fairy dust. Like it's not just my term for it. It's the kind of the visual quality of being in fairy, which in one sense is just to be at a vibration of 555 or higher. So that's the vibration where fairy is, and that is where true mania takes place, above at or above that level. Um, and so it's just kind of it's cool and it's fun to see. Um, I told you about glimmers. I should mention that glimmers can sometimes be not even visual. Like I can just have the sense in my mind, be thinking, like reading something or typing something or doing something and having kind of the sensation of a certain color. Um, Usually it'll be blue or yellow or green. Those are the commonest non-visual ones. And I still tend to take those into account as though they were actual signals. Um, I have occasionally motes of darkness, so like um, little kind of particles of smoke that kind of fall or kind of um, fall or sink out of. Um, I associate those with hell, I guess. Um, there's other colors, not commonly, but there's sometimes teals. Um, that seems to be the biggest, honestly, between blue and green is the biggest, the most frequent kind of extra colors that I come across. And I mean, not every color needs to have a symbol, a signal of its own. And a lot of the extra colors are things that take place in that 555, that fairy realm. So I don't really need to know them yet because I'm not really using them. I'm not supposed to be up there yet. Um, so um, there are strange colors that are like blacked out. It's kind of like I see the color and then I see the back of it, and the back of it is black, but it's kind of like a black that has a light to it that glows, or um, it it's not. It's kind of like a black light, um, but that's the best I can describe it. I think. So I don't really know what they mean. I have a hypothesis, but I really haven't had enough experience with them, enough data to say. Um, and and then even rarer than that, but in a similar kind of otherwise or also nonsensical, also sort of seeming how is that possible? I can occasionally, really rarely, get two colors in one. So like a yellow red thing, like where there's it almost feels like there's two sides, like a obverse and a transverse or is it reverse, um, that that are of different color. So those are kind of even more require more creativity to try to interpret. Um, so I think I've said everything, and hopefully it's not so terribly long that nobody will watch it. Okay, good night.